Howdy my totally tubular gamers, and we are back for another ranking video. In today's ranking video, we're going to be ranking the Flatout games. Now before we begin, I gotta say, if you really like ranking videos, if you like video games, you really should sub. We're doing lots of ranking videos. Anyway, Flatout. Flatout really is one of the most underrated series in all of gaming, and is arguably the most underrated racing series, I think, in all of gaming. I can't find like anybody ever talking about this series like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even recently. Nobody talks about Flatout, and you know what? I take every chance I can to talk about Flatout because I think these games, most of them are worth your time, and I think that they really should be talked about. They are criminally underrated diamonds in the rough for the most part, I think. And I think that Flatout really, again, should just be talked about more. And now the spiritual successor to Flatout, Wreckfest, has been talked about a bit more. So in honor of that, we're going to give a nice shout out to Wreckfest. Wreckfest is a fantastic game. It's made by the same developers of the original Flatout games, and I have nothing but high praise for Wreckfest. However, it does not have the Flatout name, and sure, it does have the Flatout spirit and is a great game by itself. It is not a Flatout game. Now I will say, while a lot of the Flatout games are pretty underrated, there are two in particular that I would say are not underrated, and well, those are the two that were not developed by the original developers. And speaking of not very good and not by the original developers, let's look at the worst Flatout game. The worst Flatout game is by far Flatout 3. Flatout 3 is arguably one of the worst racing games ever made, and I'm not even kidding when I say it might be the lowest rated game on Steam, like, period. It is a terrible game. It was not developed by the original developers, Bugbear, and was instead just given off to some other company who absolutely did not understand how to make a good racing game. Like, they really kind of understood what made Flatout good, but just completely failed in every single aspect with horrible physics, terrible controls. The driving is just god-awful. There is nothing good here. The graphics are worse than the original Flatout somehow. The blur is just out of control. There is absolutely nothing good about this game. There's nothing even decent about this game. This is one of the worst racing games I've ever played. Scratch that. This is just one of the worst games ever made, honestly, and I'm really honestly still mad to this day that this has the Flatout name in it, because this is a piece of shit in like every sense of the imagination. Like, it is terrible courses, terrible racing, it's not fun. They try to add the mini games like the old Flatout games. They just are not good at all. This engine sucks. There is nothing fun about this game, and I still can't believe that it's even called a Flatout game. Like, what an insult to the series. Okay, in the number 4 spot, we have not a piece of fucking shit. We have Flatout 4. Now, Flatout 4, it's also not by Bugbear, and so a lot of people don't really consider it a real Flatout game, but this game isn't terrible. It's not very good, I will say that, but it is not absolutely awful like that last game. Flatout 4 really tried to pick up the scraps that piece of shit left by, but it does an okay job. It is a subpar racing game for the most part, but it does do a few things right. The driving is a hell of a lot better than anything from that previous game. It is decent. It's not like great or even as good as the other Flatouts, but it is still okay. The destruction is pretty alright. The boosting is fun. The graphics, yeah, they're pretty subpar and not very good. And the music is questionable at best. The courses are actually kind of fun. Some of the mini games thrown in are decent enough, and the racing is it's an alright time. This game is at its very worst not very good, and at its best it's just quite mediocre and decent. I can say though it's not an insult to the series, so that's good. I will say the rubber banding AI is extremely bad in this game. Like, Flatout doesn't have the best AI. I'm the first to admit that, but it is definitely really bad. The rubber banding is really bad in this game. Like, they will always seem to catch you no matter how fast you're going, and it just really be like that. But don't worry, from here on out, the series is quite good. Flatout 3 and 4, really, again, they're not by Bugbear, not really worth talking about. However, the next game, in the number 3 spot, we have the original Flatout. Now, the original Flatout came out in the early 2000s, and really, there was not any racing games like this game. Now, most racing games, they got pretty professional looking cars. They got really cool, sleek vehicles with nice interiors and all that jazz. No, not Flatout. Flatout instead decides to do the exact opposite. They get a bunch of junkers, a bunch of piles of crap like the salvage crap, and they just have these cars just destroy each other. They are racing, but they're totaling everything. Not only are they totaling the environment, they're totaling these cars. These cars are getting it destroyed. Now, lots of games have minor damage modeling. I mean, sometimes you'll get some dents on the car, the windshield will break, and maybe it'll look a little beat up. Not in Flatout. In Flatout, these things get absolutely annihilated to the point that you can't even recognize it's a car anymore. Like, they get absolutely obliterated. Damage modeling, damage modeling, damage modeling. It is superb. It is extremely satisfying. In addition to this, when you're totaling other cars in the environment, the game constantly rewards you with boost, meaning you're going even faster. You're smashing into the other cars even faster. Honestly, destroying the other opponents is more fun than racing them. I just love the destruction and pure chaos that this game has. The courses, for the most part, they're pretty basic. They don't really do anything all that interesting. The tracks are very basic. They're honestly a bit subpar, but just going through them, destroying everything is very fun. And the graphics really sell the deal. The music is absolutely awesome. I love the music. It is what you'd want in a game like this. It is heavy metal. It is screaming. It is great. There's a bunch of mini games that involve your player flying out of the car windshield, which is pretty funny, and this would go on to be a staple in the series, and they just really went out there. Like, this game came out in an era where people would just make crazy ass games like this, and they could actually sell. You'd go find them in the bargain bin. Games like these just don't really exist anymore, and that's really a shame. But Flatout does exist, and I highly recommend the original game, as you're not going to find many other games with so many junkers getting the shit beat out of them, except maybe Wreckfest. And in the number 2 spot, we have Flatout II. Now, Flatout II really took everything from the first Flatout game and multiplied it by like 2 or 3 times. Flatout II might arguably be the most underrated racing game on the PlayStation 2, and with good reason, because it's a great game. It's the definition of a sleeper hit. The first Flatout game, I'll be the first to admit, it did have some problems. It wasn't exactly the most replayable. It just had the junkers. Some people might want more than the junkers. Most of the tracks weren't the best. The AI could be kinda crap in most aspects. The turning might not be perfect. Flatout 2 though, oh, they addressed all these. The controls and turning and physics, a lot better. AI, a bit better. The game has more than just the junkers. It has street cars, it has much nicer cars, it is the same great damage modeling. All the tracks are really well done for the most part, and the game is very replayable with all of its many modes. The physics are pretty wild in this game, and the damage modeling returns. It's even better than ever. These cars just get totally torn to shreds, and there's very few games that have such destruction as this game, and all the courses are way better in my opinion than the first Flatout games. These are just designed better, they're more interesting, and there's a lot more to destroy, and you'll be going through some of these real fast. There are a bunch of mini games, most of them are returning. There's a few new ones here and there. There's more destruction derby environments, and the game just really knows how to just blast off when it comes to fun, and the cars, because these cars go pretty fast. However, Flatout 2, as good as it is, I will say, it was actually remade. Not only was it remade, but a bunch of extra stuff was added. And now this Flatout game, ooh, they take the really good Flatout 2 and add even more to it? Well, this game surely has to be something else. And that leads me to my number 1. And the best Flatout game is easily Flatout Ultimate Carnage. Now, Flatout Ultimate Carnage really takes everything from Flatout 2 and remakes it and adds a little bit extra to it, and it just is the best. Like, it really is. Not only is it the best Flatout game by a long shot, but it is one of my favorite racing games, period, as this game is just insane. I mean, it's called Ultimate Carnage. Of course it's going to be insane. The graphics are a lot better than Flatout 2, with the damage modeling being unparalleled. In fact, other than Wreckfest, I don't think any game has ever had such good damage modeling on its cars. These cars just get totally wrecked. The courses are really fun. There is a very real sense of speed in this game. Like, more so than this game than a majority of racing games that I've ever played. It plays fully like an arcade racer. There's not even a glimpse of simulation here, like maybe how Flatout 1 might have had it with like the turning. It's not even close in this game. The AI, yeah, it is a bit rubber bandy, I'll be the first to admit, but it's not that bad in this game, especially not compared to like Flatout 2 or Flatout 1 and the other ones. But it is still a really great time. The amount of replayability this game has is unparalleled, as you could easily put over 10, 15, maybe even 20 hours if you wanted to play everything and get the gold on everything. The mini games, this is the most mini games of the whole series. All of these are super fun and I love all of them. The destruction derby stuff is great. There's other types of challenges like where you have infinite boost and you gotta destroy everyone, time trials, and there was online multiplayer that I really wish I could have played back in the day, but unfortunately there wasn't anybody playing it by the time I got the game in the early 2010s, and now it doesn't even go online at all. And one thing that I really got to give a nice shout out to is the music. The music in Flatout Ultimate Carnage is freaking perfect for this game. Like, Flatout 2 had a great soundtrack, Flatout 1 did too, but Flatout Ultimate Carnage, man, it does not get any better than that. I'm still listening to the music freaking 10, 11, 12 years later. Like, I love the music in this game. And Flatout Ultimate Carnage, like, I'm really just gonna bust a nut with how much I love this game. And if you love Flatout Ultimate Carnage, tell me in the comments. Tell me what your favorite Flatout game is, or some fun memories you have. And really, that's the end of this video. Flatout, really underrated series. Don't play 3 and 4. Wreckfest is another good alternative, but the original 3 Flatout games, 1, 2, and Ultimate Carnage, unparalleled sleeper hits that are beyond underrated. Anyway, hope you guys have a wonderful day, wonderful night, wonderful Christmas, New Year, Valentine's Day, whatever the hell it is. Subscribe for more ranking videos. Tell me your favorite Flatout. See ya.